The void between stars held many secrets, but Research Station Theta-7 was a monument to secrets that should have stayed buried. It drifted in unclaimed space, 47 light-years from the nearest registered colony, its corridors silent except for the hum of a reactor that had no business still functioning. The Korthax collective had departed 6 months prior, their insectoid vessels carrying away the successful specimens and leaving behind what their manifests classified as waste material. Inventory that cost more to transport than to terminate. Captain Ryland Kavanaugh did not know any of this when the Valder's Hope picked up the station's energy signature at 3:17 p.m. ship time. He was thinking about fuel margins and whether a derelict in unclaimed space was worth the deviation from their assigned salvage route. At 41, Kavanaugh had the weathered look of someone who had survived the frontier wars, being smarter than his enemies and meaner than his circumstances. His face bore scars from shrapnel that had killed the man standing next to him on the bridge of the destroyer Relentless, and his eyes held the permanent calculation of someone who had learned that sentiment was a luxury that got people killed. He had worked mining operations for 8 years after mustering out, then clawed his way to a salvage ship command through a combination of results and ruthlessness. The Valder's Hope was an ugly brute of a vessel, more cargo space than crew quarters, bristling with the kind of defensive weapons that suggested her captain expected trouble and planned to give better than he got. Lieutenant Paxton looked up from the sensor console, her dark face creased with concern. Where Kavanaugh was instinct and aggression, Paxton was calculation and caution. She had kept him alive through 3 encounters with pirates and 2 close calls with Korthax patrol craft by being the voice that asked uncomfortable questions. "Sir, that power signature is wrong. Station that size in unclaimed space, reactor still hot. This smells like bait." "Everything smells like bait to you, Paxton." Sergeant Dutch Hollander leaned against the weapons console with the casual confidence of someone who had killed enough people to stop counting. He was a slab of muscle and scar tissue, veteran of the Spec Ops campaigns in the Terminus cluster, with eyes that had seen humanity's enemies up close and learned to hate efficiently. Could be a corporate research facility. Black budget operation the company abandoned when funding dried up. Salvage rights on something like that could set us up for a year. Kavanaugh studied the scan results. Hollander was not wrong. The station was massive, easily 3 kilometers long, with a design profile that suggested serious money had been spent on construction. If it was truly abandoned, the equipment alone would be worth millions, but Paxton was not wrong either. Things that looked too good were usually too good. "Life signs?" he asked. Paxton ran the scan twice before responding. "Inconclusive. Getting some weird readings from the interior. Could be biological, could be equipment interference. The hull's got some kind of shielding that's scrambling deep scans. So we board and check it out," Hollander said. "Standard procedure." "Standard procedure gets you killed when you don't know what you are walking into," Paxton shot back. "We log the coordinates, report to Earth Authority, and let someone with proper military backup investigate. We are a salvage crew, not Marines." Kavanaugh made them wait while he thought it through. The smart play was Paxton's suggestion. Log it, report it, collect a finder's fee, and move on. But finder's fees did not pay for the kind of upgrades the Valder's Hope needed, did not cover the debt he still owed on her, and definitely did not buy the retirement he had been planning since his discharge. "We take a look," he decided. "But careful, Hollander full combat load. Paxton, you stay on the bridge and keep the engines hot. Anything goes wrong, you break orbit and burn for the nearest relay. Don't wait for us." "Sir, that is an order, Lieutenant. This is my call. If it goes bad on me." The airlock cycled with a hiss that seemed too loud in the oppressive silence. Kavanaugh led the team through, Hollander at his shoulder with a rifle that had seen action in a dozen combat zones, 2 more crew behind them. Corporal Ashford carried medical gear and a sidearm she probably knew how to use. Technician Grimes had demolition expertise and the kind of nervous energy that made Kavanaugh think he would either be very useful or very dead before this was over. The corridor beyond was pristine in a way that set off every alarm bell in Kavanaugh's head. This was not the comfortable disorder of a working station. This was clinical, sterile, the kind of clean that suggested someone cared very much about contamination protocols. Biohazard markers, Ashford said quietly, her voice tight. She pointed at wall panels marked with universal symbols and others in script that the translator struggled to parse. Sir, this is a Korthax facility. Kavanaugh felt something cold settle in his gut. The Korthax Collective was not humanity's enemy, technically. They were a regional power with technology that often exceeded human capabilities, insected in nature, with a civilization built on rigid hierarchies and an unsettling tendency to view other species as resources to be optimized. Humanity had fought 2 brief wars with them, won one, lost one, and settled into the kind of cold peace where both sides watched each other and prepared for the inevitable third round. If this was a Korthax station, it meant complications, legal challenges, diplomatic incidents, the kind of bureaucratic nightmare that could tie up salvage claims for years. Should we abort? Paxton's voice crackled through the calm. Kavanaugh considered it. The smart play was to leave now before they touched anything that could be used as evidence of trespassing. But that power signature bothered him. The Korthax did not abandon functional stations. They were efficient to the point of obsession. If they had left this place, there was a reason, and that reason might be valuable enough to risk the complications. Negative, we proceed. Weapons hot. Anything moves, you put it down. They moved deeper into the station, and the clinical atmosphere grew more pronounced. Laboratories lined the corridors, filled with equipment Kavanaugh could not begin to identify. Genetic sequencers the size of cargo containers, incubation chambers with transparent walls showing empty interior spaces, operating theaters with restraints built into the tables, designed for bodies that were not insectoid. The purpose of this place was becoming clear, and Kavanaugh liked it less with every step. Captain. Hollander had stopped at an intersection, his rifle tracking toward a side corridor. Movement, multiple contacts. Kavanaugh moved up beside him, weapon ready. The corridor opened into a larger space, some kind of holding area, and it was not empty. There were people inside, not human, not quite, but close enough to trigger the uncanny valley response that made Kavanaugh's skin crawl. They were humanoid, bipedal, with features that suggested genetic relationship to baseline human. But their skin was wrong, too pale, almost translucent, with patterns of bioluminescence tracing lines down their arms and faces. Their eyes were too large, adapted for low light. Their frames were emaciated, ribs visible under skin that looked too fragile, and they were staring at the armed humans with expressions that combined terror and something that looked like resignation. They expected to die. Kavanaugh realized it with cold certainty. They saw the weapons and the armor, and they expected execution. One of them stepped forward, older than the others, male, with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed in complex rhythms down his neck and arms. He raised his hands, palms out, in a gesture that might have been surrender or greeting. When he spoke, his voice was rough, unpracticed. "You are not Korthax." "No," Kavanaugh said carefully. He did not lower his weapon, but he did not aim it directly at the speaker either. "We're human. This is a salvage operation. Who are you?" "I am called Thyron." "We are Vehl. We are property of the Korthax Collective, failed specimens awaiting termination." He said it without emotion, stating facts. "You are here to collect salvage. We are salvage. Will you make it quick?" The matter-of-fact acceptance of execution hit harder than fear would have. Kavanaugh glanced at Hollander, who was studying the Vehl with the analytical eye of someone assessing tactical value. Ashford looked horrified. Grimes had gone pale. "Stand down," Kavanaugh ordered, and the team lowered their weapons slightly. Not holstered, not safe, but not pointed at the Vehl. "We are not here to execute anyone. We are here to assess salvage value. How many of you are on this station?" Thyron's bioluminescent patterns pulsed faster, something that might have been confusion or stress. 3,217, across 12 holding complexes. The Korthax departed 173 days ago. "They said we would be terminated remotely, but the signal has not come. We have been waiting." 3,000. Kavanaugh felt the number like a physical weight. 3,000 people, genetically engineered property, left to die on an abandoned station. The legal complications alone would be a nightmare, But something else was nagging at him, something about the way Thyron spoke, the precision of his numbers. "You have been counting the days." "Yes, we count everything. It is how we were designed. To observe, to record, to remember." Thyron tilted his head in a gesture that was eerily human. The Korthax valued accurate data, even from failed specimens. Failed how? Too independent, too resistant to conditioning. Genetic anomalies that made us unsuitable for intended purpose. Thyron's patterns pulsed in what might have been bitter amusement. "We think too much, ask too many questions. The Korthax bred us for labor, but we developed curiosity. That is failure." Hollander spoke up, his voice flat. "What kind of labor?" "Whatever was required. Construction, mining, research assistance, hazardous material handling. We were designed to be intelligent enough for complex tasks but psychologically compliant enough not to resist. The successful specimens are deployed across Korthax space. We are the mistakes." Kavanaugh made a decision he knew he would probably regret. "Ashford medical assessment. I want to know what we are dealing with." "Grimes, find the computer core, pull whatever data you can. Hollander, check the other holding complexes, verify the numbers." He turned back to Thyron. "You speak Galactic Common pretty well for someone who was left to die." "We had time to learn. The station's educational systems still function. We have been teaching ourselves." Knowledge seemed. Thyron searched for the word. "Meaningful. Even if we die, we wanted to die knowing more than we did yesterday." "You are not going to die today," Kavanaugh said, and even as the words left his mouth, he was wondering what the hell he was doing. Over the next 4 hours, they explored Research Station Theta-7 and uncovered its purpose. The Korthax had been running a genetic engineering program for 2 centuries, creating custom species for specific purposes. The Vehl were Generation 14, optimized for cognitive function and manual dexterity, with shortened lifespans and built-in dependency on specific nutrients to ensure compliance. The station had been one of several facilities, and when the program had been consolidated to a more secure location, the failed specimens had simply been abandoned. The numbers were accurate. 3,217 Vehl, ranging in age from adolescent to what passed for elderly in a species with a 40-year natural lifespan. Most were in poor health, suffering from malnutrition and the psychological trauma of 200 years of institutional cruelty. Grimes emerged from the computer core looking like he had seen something that made him physically ill. "Captain, you need to see this. The data files. They have detailed records, experiment logs, success rates, termination protocols." He swallowed hard. "They logged everything, every test, every failure, every specimen they killed. It is all there, documented like a quality control report." "Copy everything," Kavanaugh ordered. "Full data pull. I want every file on our system." "Sir, some of this is encrypted with Korthax military-grade security. If we crack that, we are talking about espionage charges." "Then we better hope we find something worth the risk." "Do it." It was Hollander who found the real value. He returned from his survey of the holding complexes with an expression that Kavanaugh had learned to recognize. It was the look Hollander got when he had found something tactically significant. "Boss, we need to talk, private." They moved to a side laboratory out of earshot of the crew. Hollander pulled up a data file on his portable terminal. "The Vehl are not just lab specimens. Look at this." The Korthax were using them for weapons testing. Exposure to various compounds, radiation, biological agents. Testing human analog response to weapons the Korthax planned to use against us. Kavanaugh felt his blood run cold. They were using them as proxies, testing anti-human weapons on human-adjacent targets. Gets better. Some of the Vehl were part of a program called Biological Asset Weaponization. The Korthax engineered combat capabilities into them. Enhanced strength, accelerated reflexes, regeneration factors. But there were problems. The modifications caused psychological instability, and they could not figure out how to make the Vehl controllable when activated. So they shelved the program and left the test subjects here. "You are telling me there are 3,000 people on this station who might be walking biological weapons?" "I am telling you there are 3,000 people here who have intelligence on Korthax weapons programs, facility locations, research priorities, and military capabilities." And some of them might have combat augmentation that the Korthax could not control. Hollander grinned, and it was not a pleasant expression. This is not a salvage operation anymore, boss. This is the intelligence coup of the decade. Kavanaugh stared at the data files, his mind racing through implications. If he brought this to Earth authority, if the Vehl could provide detailed intelligence on Korthax military research, the value would be immense. The kind of information that won wars. The kind of leverage that shifted the balance of power. It would also make him and his crew targets for every Korthax asset in this sector. Paxton, he said into his comm, prepare for evacuation operations. We are taking passengers. Sir, Paxton's voice was carefully neutral. How many passengers? All of them. The silence on the other end lasted 3 seconds. Captain, we do not have life support for 3,000 refugees. We would be at 400% capacity. Environmental systems would fail within a week. We would run out of food in 3 days. This is not feasible. Make it feasible, Lieutenant. Figure it out. We are not leaving them. May I ask why not, sir? This is a legal and logistical nightmare. We are a salvage crew. We do not have the authority or capability to. They have intelligence on Korthax military operations. Kavanaugh cut her off. Weapons programs, facility locations, research data. The kind of information Earth Defense Command would pay a fortune for. And if we leave them here, the Korthax will come back and terminate them to cover their tracks. We are taking them. Another pause. Then Paxton's voice resigned. Understood, sir. I will start emergency life support protocols, but Ryland, if this goes wrong, it goes wrong on me. Start the prep work. The evacuation was chaos. The Vehl had never left the station, had never experienced transport, had never been told they had value beyond their function. The concept of rescue was almost as terrifying as the prospect of termination. Many refused to move at first, convinced this was another test, another experiment. Thyron helped, moving through the crowds, explaining in their own language that the humans were offering something unprecedented. Freedom. Or at least the possibility of it. But not all the Vehl believed him. Kavanaugh was coordinating the loading of the 3rd shuttle when the incident happened. A younger Vehl, designation Verix according to the station manifest, had been calm during the boarding process. But halfway through the shuttle ride to the Valder's Hope, something in him snapped. He attacked the crew member nearest to him, moving with speed that should not have been possible for someone in his physical condition. His hands closed around the technician's throat, and his eyes had gone completely black, the bioluminescent patterns across his skin blazing white-hot. Hollander put him down with a stun baton, but it took 3 hits to drop him. When Verix finally collapsed, he was convulsing, blood running from his nose and ears. Ashford worked on him frantically, trying to stabilize vitals that were spiking across the board. What the hell was that? Grimes demanded, backing away from the unconscious Vehl. Combat activation, Hollander said grimly. I saw something like this in the files. Stress triggers cause the biological weapon augmentation to activate. Enhanced physical capabilities, but it burns them out. He will be dead in an hour. Verix died in 43 minutes, his body simply shutting down as the augmentation consumed him from the inside. They wrapped his corpse and moved it to cargo and continued the evacuation. But the incident had shaken the crew. These were not just refugees. Some of them were unstable, dangerous. Kavanaugh gathered his senior staff in the mess hall while the evacuation continued. Paxton, Hollander, Ashford, and Dr. Idris, the ship's medical officer who had been working himself to exhaustion trying to assess the Vehl's conditions. Give me options, Kavanaugh said without preamble. We have 3,000 refugees, some of whom are apparently walking time bombs. What are we looking at? Dr. Idris was a tall man, nervous energy barely contained, with the look of someone who had not slept in 2 days. The biological weapon modifications are not in all of them, maybe 20% based on the files I have reviewed. The augmentation is triggered by extreme stress or fear. Once activated, it cannot be reversed. The subject burns through their metabolic reserves in hours and dies. It is, he struggled for the word. It is monstrous. They were turned into suicide weapons. Can we identify which ones have the modification? Paxton asked. Not without detailed genetic screening that would take weeks. The Korthax did not mark them. They are mixed in with the general population. Then we space the unstable ones, Hollander said flatly. Before they activate and kill someone, cold math, 20% of 3,000 is 600. I'm not risking this ship and crew for 600 potential threats. We are not executing them, Ashford said sharply. They did not ask for this. They are victims. They are biological weapons with faulty safeties. Victims or not, they are a threat. Kavanaugh held up a hand before the argument could escalate. No one is getting spaced, but Hollander is not wrong about the risk. Dr. Idris, can you sedate the ones who show signs of instability? I can try, but I do not know what unstable looks like until they activate, and by then it is too late. Then we keep them separated as much as possible. Small groups, isolated sections. We monitor for signs of stress and sedate anyone who looks like they might lose it. Kavanaugh looked at each of them. This is not ideal, I know that, but we are committed now. We finish the evacuation, we get them to Ashford Colony, and we let Earth Authority figure out the long-term solution. And if the Korthax come back for them, Paxton asked quietly, then we deal with that when it happens. The Korthax came back 17 hours later. The Valder's Hope was 8 hours from Ashford Colony, running at maximum burn with every available space crammed with Vehl refugees when the proximity alarm screamed. 4 Korthax destroyers dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly in their path, weapons charging. Evasive, Kavanaugh ordered, but he knew it was futile. The Valder's Hope was a cargo hauler, not a warship. She had defensive weapons, but against 4 destroyers, they might as well have been throwing rocks. The comm crackled with a transmission. The voice was synthesized, the product of Korthax vocal apparatus running through a translator. Human vessel Valder's Hope, you are in possession of stolen Korthax property. You will surrender the property immediately or be destroyed. You have 5 minutes to comply. Kavanaugh looked at his crew. Paxton was pale but steady, her hands already running calculations on the navigation console. Hollander had moved to weapons, knowing they were useless but preparing them anyway. On the screens, he could see the Vehl and the cargo holds, crowded together, looking up at the cameras with expressions that had gone from hope back to resignation. They knew what was coming. They had always known. Open a channel, Kavanaugh said. Paxton complied. The connection established with a click. This is Captain Ryland Kavanaugh of the Valder's Hope. I do not recognize property rights over sentient beings. These people are under human protection. You want them, you go through me. The response was immediate. You are 1 vessel against 4. Your destruction will be logged as resistance to lawful property recovery. You have 4 minutes. Kavanaugh closed the channel. Paxton, emergency broadcast to Earth Defense Command. Full situation report. Include everything. The station, the Vehl, the weapons research, all of it. If we go down, I want them to know why. Already sent, sir. But even if they dispatch a response, we are 6 hours from the nearest patrol route. They will not get here in time. Then we buy time. Kavanaugh activated shipwide intercom. All hands combat stations, prepare for engagement. He switched to the channel that connected to the cargo holds where Thyron and the other Vehl leaders were gathered. Thyron, I need you to listen carefully. The Korthax are here. They are demanding we hand you over. We are not going to do that, but we are outgunned. This is going to get bad. Thyron's face appeared on the screen, his bioluminescent patterns pulsing rapidly. You should surrender us. Your ship cannot fight 4 destroyers. You will die for nothing. If I was worried about dying for nothing, I would not have picked you up in the first place. I need to know if any of your people have combat capability, the biological weapon modifications. We need every advantage we can get. Thyron was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful. There are 247 of us with the modifications. We can feel them dormant, waiting. If we activate them, we become what the Korthax designed us to be, strong, fast, deadly, but we will die within hours. The augmentation is not sustainable. I am not asking you to activate anything. I am asking if you understand how to fight. We understand violence, Captain. We have lived with it our entire lives. We have watched others be terminated. We have survived experiments that killed thousands. Some of us fought back when we could, killed researchers, sabotaged equipment. The Korthax called it aggression malfunction. We called it resistance. Thyron's pattern settled into a steady, cold rhythm. If you give us weapons, we will fight. We have nothing to lose. We are dead either way. Better to die taking Korthax with us. Kavanaugh made a decision that probably made him a war criminal under 6 different treaties. Hollander, arm them. Anyone who wants to fight gets a weapon and basic instruction. We have 3 minutes. Sir, Paxton started. Not now, Lieutenant. Hollander, move. The sergeant was already heading for the armory. On it, boss. The Korthax attack came exactly on schedule. Plasma weapons lit up the void, slamming into the Valder's Hope shields. The first hit dropped them to 60%, the second to 30%. The third burned through and scored the hull, tearing through cargo section 3 and venting atmosphere. Kavanaugh fought his ship with everything he had, throwing her into evasive maneuvers that the cargo hauler was not designed for, burning maneuvering thrusters beyond safety limits. The Valder's Hope shuddered and groaned under the strain. He managed to get off 2 counter shots with the defensive railguns, 1 miss, 1 grazing hit that did negligible damage. They were not going to win this fight. They were barely surviving it. Hull breach in sections 3 and 7, Paxton reported, her voice clipped and professional. Life support failing in 4 sections. We have lost 43 refugees to decompression, 43 dead. The number hit like a physical blow. Kavanaugh had gotten them killed, his decision, his responsibility. Captain, they are launching boarding pods, Hollander reported. 6 pods, magnetic clamps, they are coming in through the damaged sections. The Korthax were not going to destroy the ship. They were going to take it, recover their property, and probably execute the human crew for theft and resistance. Standard procedure. Repel boarders, Kavanaugh ordered. Hollander, take anyone who can hold a weapon and make them regret getting on my ship. With pleasure, sir. The fighting in the corridors of the Valder's Hope was brutal in close quarters. The Korthax soldiers were professionals, equipped with powered armor and advanced weapons. But they were expecting to face a cargo crew and compliant property. What they got was Sergeant Hollander leading a mixed force of human crew and Vehl, who had decided that if they were going to die, they were taking their tormentors with them. Thyron fought in the vanguard, a human rifle in his hands that he barely knew how to use. The first Korthax soldier he encountered regarded him with the detached interest of someone observing a malfunctioning machine. It broadcast the compliance command, the genetic compulsion that should have made Thyron drop his weapon and submit. Thyron felt the command like hooks in his mind, the genetic imperative to obey. For 200 years, his species had been unable to resist that command. But something had changed. The activation triggers in his genetic code were degrading, damaged by malnutrition and stress and time. The command still pulled at him, still demanded obedience, but it did not own him anymore. Thyron pulled the trigger. The shot went wide, scoring the bulkhead, but he had resisted. He had fired on a Korthax. Others saw it and followed. The genetic slavery that had defined their existence for 2 centuries was breaking. The Korthax soldier adapted quickly, bringing its weapon to bear. It fired, and the plasma bolt caught Thyron in the shoulder, spinning him around and slamming him into the wall. The pain was incredible, worse than anything the experiments had inflicted. His bioluminescent patterns flared chaotic white, and he felt something else wake up inside him. The biological weapon modification activated. It was not a choice. It was a cascade of genetic triggers responding to trauma and threat. Thyron felt his muscles spasm and then lock into configurations that should not have been possible. His metabolism spiked, burning through reserves at a terrifying rate. His vision shifted, colors becoming sharper, motion tracking becoming instinctive. And the pain vanished, replaced by a cold, predatory clarity. He was going to die. The activation would kill him in hours. But right now, he was more than he had ever been. Thyron moved. The Korthax soldier tried to track him, but he was too fast, crossing the distance in a blur of motion that surprised even him. His hands closed on the soldier's armor, and he felt the metal crumple under a grip strength that should have been impossible. He tore plates away and drove his fingers into the joints, finding the soft, insectoid body underneath. The soldier made a sound that might have been surprise or pain. Thyron did not care which. He had spent his entire life being hurt by these creatures. Now he returned the favor. Other Vehl saw what was happening, saw Thyron moving like something out of nightmare, tearing through Korthax armor with his bare hands. And they felt the same activation triggers in their own genetic code, dormant weapons waking up in response to combat stimuli. The choice spread through the Vehl fighters in the corridors. Activate and become the weapons they were designed to be, burn bright and deadly for a few hours before dying, or stay as they were, weak and starving, and die anyway. It was not a hard choice. 247 Vehl activated their combat modifications in the corridors and cargo holds of the Valder's Hope. The transformation was horrifying and beautiful. Their bioluminescent patterns blazed like white fire. Their bodies reconfigured, muscle and bone shifting into optimal combat geometry, and they fell on the Korthax borders with 2 centuries of rage and pain distilled into pure violence. Hollander fought beside them, his rifle barking in controlled bursts, and even with all his combat experience, he felt a primal fear watching the activated Vehl fight. They were not soldiers. They had no training, no discipline, but they had strength and speed that made them terrifying, and they had absolutely nothing to lose. The Korthax boarding teams lasted 6 minutes before falling back to their pods. They had taken 70% casualties and failed to secure any objective. The survivors retreated, their tactical doctrine having no protocol for property that fought back with suicidal ferocity. On the bridge, Kavanaugh watched the tactical display and knew they had maybe minutes before the destroyers decided to just obliterate his ship and write off the property loss. They had bloodied the Korthax, but they had not won. The Valder's Hope was crippled, venting atmosphere from multiple hull breaches, life support failing, and now he had 247 Vehl who were dying from the inside out. "Sir, contact on long-range sensors," Paxton said suddenly. "Human signature. Military transponder. It is the Ironheart heavy cruiser and she is burning hard for our position." Kavanaugh felt something that might have been hope. The Ironheart was a fleet combat vessel, one of humanity's premier warships. If she was here, if she intervened. The comm crackled. "Valder's Hope, this is Commander Stellan of the EDS Ironheart. We received your emergency transmission. Stand by for fire support." The Ironheart dropped out of FTL travel like the fist of an angry god, her weapons already charging. She was beautiful in the way that warships were beautiful, all lethal angles and barely contained violence. The Korthax destroyers broke formation immediately, recognizing the threat, but Commander Stellan did not give them time to coordinate a response. The Ironheart opened fire with her main railguns, coherent slugs of magnetically accelerated metal traveling at relativistic speeds. First destroyer took a hit amidships and came apart in a bloom of atmosphere and debris. The second managed to get shields up, but the Ironheart's guns punched through and crippled its drive section. The remaining 2 Korthax ships attempted to retreat, but Stellan had positioned the Ironheart to cut off their escape vector. He broadcast on the open channel, his voice calm and absolutely merciless. "Korthax vessels, you are in violation of human-protected space. You fired on a human-flagged vessel. You will stand down or be destroyed. Choose quickly." The Korthax chose survival. Their ships powered down weapons and held position. "Valder's Hope, this is Ironheart. We are sending damage control teams and medical support. Hold your position." Kavanaugh collapsed into his command chair, the adrenaline draining away and leaving him shaking. They had survived, barely, at enormous cost, but they had survived. In the cargo hold, Thyron leaned against a bulkhead, feeling his body begin to fail. The combat augmentation was consuming him, burning through metabolic reserves that were already depleted. Around him, other activated Vehl were collapsing, their bioluminescent patterns flickering and fading. They had hours at most, maybe less, but they had fought. They had resisted. They had taken their freedom by force from the species that had enslaved them. It was enough. It had to be enough. Commander Stellan came aboard the Valder's Hope 4 hours later, after his damage control teams had stabilized the life support and sealed the worst of the hull breaches. He was a man in his late 50s, gray at the temples, with the bearing of someone who had commanded ships through multiple combat engagements and made the kind of decisions that left scars on the soul. He found Kavanaugh in the medical bay, where Dr. Idris was working frantically to save the activated Vehl. The doctor had set up triage protocols, treating the ones he thought he could save and making the others comfortable. It was brutal calculus, and Idris looked like he was aging a year for every decision he made. "Captain Kavanaugh," Stellan said without preamble, "you have created an interstellar incident. The Korthax Collective has lodged formal complaints with Earth's central government. They are demanding the return of their property and your arrest for theft and piracy." Kavanaugh met his eyes without flinching. "Their property is sentient beings they grew in laboratories and left to die. I'm not returning them. I read your report, the weapons research, the intelligence value, the biological weapon modifications." Stellan paused. "I also read the experiment logs you pulled from the station. What they did to these people. 200 years of systematic cruelty documented like a quality control program. So you understand why I am not handing them back. I understand that you made a unilateral decision that could start a war. I also understand that you did it anyway, knowing the cost. That takes either courage or stupidity, possibly both." Stellan's expression was unreadable. "The Korthax want you arrested. Earth Defense Command wants the intelligence data you recovered. The diplomatic corps wants to pretend this never happened. And I am the poor bastard who has to figure out how to make everyone happy. Are you going to arrest me?" "No. Because despite being a pain in my ass, you did the right thing. And because the Vehl have intelligence value that makes them worth protecting. This is not charity, Captain. This is strategic calculation. Those people know things about Korthax military operations that are worth billions. Earth Defense Command wants to debrief them, all of them, which means keeping them alive and safe from Korthax retaliation." Kavanaugh felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. "So you are going to protect them?" "I am going to protect assets that have military intelligence value. What they are beyond that is not my concern. But yes, as long as they are useful, they are under human protection." Stellan glanced at the medical bay, where Vehl were dying despite Idris's best efforts. "What is the status of the activated ones?" 247 activated during the boarding action. Dr. Idris estimates we will lose all of them within 72 hours. The biological weapon modification is not sustainable. It burns them out from the inside. Can he save any of them? He is trying, but the Korthax designed this to be a suicide weapon. There is no off switch." Stellan nodded slowly. "Then we make their deaths count for something. I want full debriefs from all of them before they die. Everything they know about Korthax facilities, weapons programs, research priorities. If they have to die anyway, they can at least die knowing they struck a real blow against their creators." It was cold, practical, exactly the kind of calculus that had made Stellan a successful commander, and Kavanaugh could not argue with it because it was the same calculus he had used when deciding to take the Vehl in the first place. The debriefs began immediately. Intelligence officers from the Ironheart worked in shifts, recording everything the dying Vehl could tell them. Facility locations, security protocols, weapon specifications. The Korthax had not expected their property to remember, much less report, and the Vehl had 200 years of detailed observations. Thyron lasted longer than most. His enhanced physiology fought the burnout for 3 days, long enough to provide detailed intelligence on 17 separate research facilities and the locations of 3 Korthax military staging areas. He worked with the intelligence officers until his body simply would not function anymore, until his bioluminescent patterns were barely visible and his speech was slurred from organ failure. Kavanaugh sat with him at the end, in a medical bay that smelled of antiseptic and death. "We got them," Thyron whispered, his voice barely audible. "The intelligence you are getting, it will hurt them, set their programs back years. We struck back. You did more than that. You fought for your freedom and won. The Korthax retreated. They failed to recover you. That is a victory." Thyron's patterns pulsed weakly, something that might have been amusement. "I am dying, Captain. Hard to call this victory. You are dying free. You died fighting. That is more than the Korthax wanted to give you. I wanted to see Sanctuary, the city you are building for my people. I wanted to live long enough to see what we could become without them controlling us. The others will see it, the ones who survive. They will build something worth building, and they will remember that you made it possible." Thyron's hand moved, fumbling for Kavanaugh's. The captain took it, feeling how cold the Vehl's skin had become, how weak his pulse was. "Tell them," Thyron said. "Tell them we were not victims at the end. We were warriors. We chose how we died. That matters." "I will tell them." Thyron's bioluminescent patterns faded to nothing. His breathing stopped. And Captain Ryland Kavanaugh sat with the body of someone who had been property and became a soldier, someone who had been designed as a tool and died as a person. The final count was brutal. Of the 247 Vehl who activated their combat modifications, all died within 4 days. Another 112 died from injuries sustained during the evacuation or the battle. The Valder's Hope was damaged beyond economical repair and would be scrapped. 8 human crew members were dead, including Grimes and 2 others Kavanaugh had served with for years. The survivors, 2,898 Vehl, were transported to Ashford Colony under military escort. Commander Stellan made it clear that this was protective custody, not asylum, and that their status would be determined by Earth's central government after thorough debriefing. But they were alive, and they were free of the Korthax. Dr. Idris continued his work on the genetic kill switches embedded in the Vehl genome. The Korthax had designed them to activate after prolonged separation from Korthax control, cascading organ failure time to prevent escaped property from surviving. Idris worked around the clock, driven by the knowledge that without a solution, all the surviving Vehl would be dead within 6 months. The breakthrough came 3 weeks after the battle. Idris discovered that the kill switches could be disrupted by targeted genetic therapy, burning out the control mechanisms even at the cost of some metabolic function. It was not perfect. It would leave the Vehl with shortened lifespans, maybe 60 years instead of 80, but it would let them live. The first successful treatment was performed on a young Vehl named Oral. He survived the procedure and woke up to learn that he had a future. The news spread through the refugee population like wildfire. They had escaped slavery, they had survived a battle, and now they would live. Sanctuary was built in a valley on Ashford's moon, funded by Earth Defense Command as part of the intelligence agreement. The Vehl would provide full cooperation with ongoing debriefings, and in exchange they would receive land, resources, and protection. It was a transaction, not charity. The Vehl understood that. They preferred it. They had been victims long enough. Being valued for what they could do, for what they knew, was better than being pitied for what had been done to them. The memorial was built first. Black granite quarried from the moon itself, carved with names in 3 languages. Every Vehl who had died in the Korthax laboratories as far as records could reconstruct. And below those names, in letters carved with particular care, the 8 human crew members who had died defending them. And below those, in a section that took up an entire wall, the names of the 247 Vehl who had activated their combat modifications and died fighting. At the bottom, a single line in galactic common. They chose how they died. They died as warriors. Captain Ryland Kavanaugh was promoted to commander and given a new ship, a frigate built for patrol and interdiction work. He named her Sanctuary's Blade and made a point of visiting Ashford Colony whenever his duties allowed. The Vehl remembered him, not as a savior, but as the human who had treated them as assets worth protecting. It was a subtle distinction, but an important one. Sergeant Dutch Hollander mustered out of the salvage service and took a contract position as Sanctuary's defense coordinator. He trained Vehl volunteers in combat doctrine, treating them with the same brutal honesty he had shown human recruits. Those who could not keep up washed out, those who could earn his respect. Within 2 years, Sanctuary had a militia that could hold its own against most threats. Dr. Idris stayed on Ashford as the chief medical officer for Vehl Health Services. He continued refining the genetic therapy, gradually improving outcomes until the Vehl lifespan approached human normal. He carried the weight of the 247 he could not save, but he found meaning in the thousands he could. And across Korthax space, in facilities that humanity did not yet know about, other created species began receiving messages, smuggled out through networks that should not have existed, passed along by sympathetic individuals who risked everything to spread the word. The messages told a about a species called the Vehl who had been property for 200 years, about humans who had refused to recognize that property claim, about a battle where the enslaved fought back and won, about a place called Sanctuary where the freed were building lives of their own choosing. The messages always ended the same way. Freedom is not given, it is taken. And when you are ready to take yours, we will be here. Bring your intelligence, bring your strength, and we will fight beside you. Because people helped each other, but only if they proved they were worth helping. 5 years after the evacuation of Research Station Theta-7, Commander Kavanaugh returned to Ashford Colony and stood before the memorial. The city had grown beyond recognition. What had started as emergency shelters was now a community of 5,000, with architecture that blended human engineering and Vehl aesthetics. The buildings had large windows to let in light, open spaces after generations of confinement, and bioluminescent gardens that glowed at night with patterns that echoed the markings on Vehl's skin. An older Vehl approached him, moving with the confidence that the younger generation had developed. Her name was Priya and she had been 14 when the humans rescued her. Now she was 19, educated, employed in Sanctuary's construction corps and completely unaware of what it meant to be property. "Commander Kavanaugh," she said with a smile, "welcome back. Are you here for the dedication?" "What dedication?" "The new memorial wing, for the humans who fought with us. We are adding a section to honor your crew. Elder Veshk approved the design himself." Veshk. Kavanaugh remembered him. The elder who had argued that staying and dying was better than being rescued, who had changed his mind when he saw the Vehl fight back. "I would like to see it." The new section was carved from the same black granite, positioned so that the names of the human crew members faced the names of the Vehl warriors. Between them, a relief sculpture showed humans and Vehl fighting side by side, united not by sentiment but by common cause. Beneath the sculpture, a new inscription: "They did not save us. They fought beside us. This is the difference between charity and respect." Kavanaugh stood there for a long time, reading names of people he had served with, people who had died because he made a choice. The weight of command never got lighter, but standing here, seeing what had been built with that sacrifice, he thought maybe it had been worth it. "The memorial is not just for remembering," Priya said quietly. "It is a promise that we will never be property again. That anyone who tries to take our freedom will face what the Korthax faced. We are not victims anymore, Commander. We are people who defend ourselves." "Good," Kavanaugh said. "That is exactly what you should be." He placed his hand against the memorial stone, feeling the carved names under his fingers, the weight of the dead, the responsibility of the living, the cold calculus that said some things were worth fighting for, not because they were easy, but because walking away would cost more than blood. In the distance, young Vehl trained in combat drills under Dutch Hollander's demanding eye. Construction crews worked on expanding the city. Dr. Idris's medical facility hummed with activity as new therapies were developed and tested. And in the council chambers, Vehl leaders met with human officials to coordinate intelligence sharing and mutual defense. It was not perfect. There were arguments, disagreements, cultural friction, but it was theirs. Built by choice, defended by strength, and maintained by the understanding that freedom was not a gift. It was a right you proved you deserved by being willing to fight for it. And somewhere in the void between stars, the Korthax Collective recalculated their models and their strategies, learning the hard lesson that humanity had known for millennia. Property that fights back is not property anymore. It is the enemy, and it will not stop until it wins.